All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back and at 'em. Our next speaker is from Smart Rent. He's spoken at MPEX. He's spoken at the Big Elixir. Jon Carstens on the Grand Bank of Jon Jon. Give it up!
Not insured. Don't use it. So I'm sure you read the title and the first thing you think is, Jon, why are you creating a bank? Well, I'm glad you asked. I just have one word. You see, my kids discovered Amazon. And that you can find anything on Amazon. That it's this magical place. No matter what you put in, only limited to your imagination, you can find anything. It's filled with fantastical things. And in fact, they figured out that you can even get Alexa to spell these fantastic searches to get you the things you want when you don't quite know how to use it. And as such, an adult using Amazon can go to it and maybe have a mix between logical thoughts and illogical, some control, some lack of control, some impulse buys, but a child viewing Amazon is totally different. And they have no concept of money or what to do or how to save or how to avoid getting so much stuff. And so I got to thinking, my wife and I used to work for a finance tech company for quite a number of years. And I thought I knew a thing or two about money, and we consulted and really thought about how we wanted to approach our kids about money. And we came up with what we thought sounded great and sort of landed on, let's just let them have control of the money that they earn or get gifted, and with a little bit of guidance here and there, but they'll use it how they want. And I imagined that it was perfect, that through trial and error, they would eventually learn that they can't immediately spend, and they can't buy useless things, and at the end would be saving more than they spend. But how kids actually handle money is totally different. No saving, immediate frivolous spending, and that eventually led to Storage Mageddon. Now, don't think, Jon, you buy your kids way too much stuff. This is a collaborative and joint venture between kid and grandparent who have fueled against us to just fill our house with useless junk. And my kids are hoarders. Some of the stuff they've gotten when they were babies and have never, ever gotten rid of. And another problem, a kid's primary form is cash, of money, of payment, of anything is cash. And it just goes everywhere. There's no organization. They might as well just be thrown out the window. And in fact, when you deal with so many concurrent multi-tenant ledgers, the arguments that happen between child and parent handling that money are epic. And the balance is never what you tell them there is, no matter what they've purchased, that you've tried to keep track of, or you've lost here or there. And so I had to go back to thinking, this isn't working. I gotta do something different. And as I'm sitting there pondering some more, I had this idea. Make a bank. Sort of. So a traditional bank gets a flow of cash from an individual and then provides that individual with a way to access this sort of a balancer account. But they don't have to actually keep it on them. And then they turn around and they'll use it at vendors. The vendors then make requests back to the bank to say, do they actually have that money? And yes, they get stuff. So I thought, why not keep that system? And swap out the bank. I'll be the bank. And the money will come to me, and I'll provide the kids with this utility, a card, something that they can use. And they can turn around and make requests, which will then actually come back to me as well. And I'll be the voice of reason to actually say, you cannot buy that 15-foot unicorn pillow. And so the Grand Bank of Jon Jon was born. And you might be saying, Jon, why would you do this? Aren't there already resources in which you can create child's bank accounts that they can use? It's really controlled and monitored by parents. Yep, there totally is. And should you have the same need, you can totally use those. But I'm kind of what they call an over-engineer. Or in other words, I'm a dad-engineer. The positive spin is one does seemingly unnecessary things for the sake of experimentation and learning, which is how I roll. So let's totally blow this out of proportion. I had a few goals with this project and how I'm gonna help teach my kids better about money. I wanted the interaction to be theirs, mostly because I don't want to be constantly fixing or troubleshooting. I don't want to be the tech support for my children as well. I'm already that for all the rest of my family. So it needs to go without my supervision. It has to be secure. Now, I don't want to actually handle payment systems in and out, but secure in the sense that little sister can't come spend all of Big Brother's money without him knowing about it. And there has to be a little bit of transactional and order history so they can review, we can reference, not only to stop the fights, but to also show them that they did indeed make this terrible purchase and maybe they shouldn't do it in the future. And teach a bit of fiscal responsibility, because in order to get buy-in from the wife, it has to have a little bit of purpose. So let's talk about the design. It's built with all the latest and greatest technology. Got a good bit of nerves, a lot of scenic, some ecto, handle database, and Phoenix for some communication. And so the primary interface is going to be like this. I'll have the child, and I'll have an official Raspberry Pi 7-inch touchscreen. It's widely supported with Raspberry Pis, Nerves, Scenic, and all that. I'll have my cool little Nerves device. Scenic will run all the UI on it. But then we'll also add some of these cool technologies like NFC and a magnetic card stripe reader. And we'll bundle that all together and we'll call it the ATM. Because it is the automated teller machine where they will interact with it. Excuse me. We'll have the ability to, this will be all the interaction will be. You can view, order, transaction history like I was saying. This is where you authenticate purchases with those card readers. You can view your balances, because that's going to be important to know that they don't have the money that they think they have. Check on the order status, has dad or mom approved it yet, or am I still waiting? Do I want to get rid of it? And an admin portal, because I want to just be able to quickly swipe my cool card and tap and approve, and I don't have to do anything else crazy outside of that. So now we have their primary source of e-commerce, which is Amazon. And they pretty much solely use that. It's the world to them. Amazon has these buttons, though, in which they can use my real money to actually buy things. So let's swap that out and totally take over the Amazon buttons and make it a little Chrome extension. It's going to be simple, because let's face it, I'm not a JavaScript developer, and that's what it is. And you can also see a little bit of the order status if you're on a page that is linked to some order that they've requested. And when they click that button, we'll have this Phoenix communication in the middle, and it'll communicate between the two. And in fact, this may not be surprising, but I have a lot of Nerves devices around my house. And I already have a little Phoenix app running on one of my Nerves devices, so I'm just going to reuse that. And I haven't added enough things. This isn't complicated enough. So these two are going to communicate through Erlang distribution. And now my ATM doesn't have to have any concept of the internet, of any outside network, of even any WebSocket channel communication. Because I'm a big believer in local first mentality when you're coming to development. What is that? I'm glad you asked. In a typical IoT setup, you have something like this, where you're inside your network, but you got to make this request out to the cloud, and then that comes back into your network to the device you actually want to speak with, and it does whatever's work, and then it goes back out to the cloud, and that cloud disperses it back to everywhere else, including back into your network. And sometimes, actually not sometimes, all the time, this is totally dependent upon the internet. Not just your local network, but actually communicating out to other remote servers. You could be going all the way across the Atlantic and back just to get to your device 5 feet away. And that can take 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever. any amount of time that's more than a few milliseconds is forever. And let's say the internet's down. Now you can't even turn on your lights. You might as well just throw the whole thing out. But in a local first, you plan and you from the start decide, I only care about this device and its functions within the area in which I'm going to be, this local area. And you ask it directly and it gives you a response back. And then because you've started without this concept of remote, let's say you want to add remote, you just add the little pieces you need to go out, back out. And sometimes you don't need any remote communication. So now you have a way better user experience, way faster. Everyone should do this if they're getting into home automation. So in my setup, all of this is remote. None of these really have to care about what's on the internet. I guess, except the Amazon page. I gotta load an Amazon page, but they don't have to care within each other, except the database. And this is a really sore topic, so don't bring it up, but I did a many experiments, and I eventually just gave up and made it future John's problem. But that'll be coming. Let's see. Oh yeah, so let's do a cool little demo, just to see how a kid might interact. That coffee press looks good. I'm sure one of my kids might like that. So they go to this page. Here it comes. Whoop, the button's taken over. Oh, I highlighted it. Oh, now it pops up on the ATM for them. They can use their card, which is identifiable to them, plus a PIN. This is where little sister can't take over. There's no keyloggers on this. And now they've requested this order. And you got this little view. It's super simple. I know I'm so awesome at design. What are we doing? Just looking at it? Oh, you know what? I don't think they like that. Let's let them delete it. There we go. Now this is my admin card. So I can go in and I can at any time see any of the kids' orders and statuses and requests and add cards and do whatever I want because I'm the master. And I'll approve this one. That one's approved. By the way, that loading symbol is now published to Hex. You can use it. It's totally cool. So there were some fun gotchas in this project. For one, I can't do easy things. And for whatever reason, I wanted this screen to be landscape, not portrait. And I thought, oh, this is easy. I'll just rotate it in the code. That'll be no problem. And in fact, it was super easy. There's just an option that I can put in, and it rotated the screen. Worked great on my host. My laptop coded up tons of scenes. I made a firmware, deployed it, and it doesn't look right. It's all totally messed up. I scratched my head on this for a while. But what was happening is even though I had rotated the viewport, the reference that it works off, the 0, 0, was still at the point at which the screen was horizontal or landscape. And so all of my translations were going off this point, and I instead had to actually go to the center if I'm on the device and then calculate an offset to decide where it might fit in if the screen was actually landscape. So that worked out well. And because this is a technical talk, technically, here's a bit of code on how I did that, in case it helps anybody else. It's not hard, just some basic, interesting math. The other one is I wanted thumbnails. And in most cases, when you go to web development, this might kind of be an easy take. You just take whatever they have. But when you have to actually render things on a screen and you don't know what you're doing with graphics, it can be a huge deal. And I felt this was really important because kids are very visual. They don't want to read a bunch of text. Let's face it, that's on there for me. They want to see pictures, and that's how they're going to identify. And what I had to do, Scenic has this concept of dynamic textures, which is textures what you would call the image, but I could never get that to work. Somebody smarter than me could probably figure it out. But I had to do like a quasi-dynamic textures system with static textures. And so, oh, I forgot I had that. So yeah, there's the cool thumbnails. They're rendering, that's fun. So I kind of had to do this lookup the first time I need to render it and check if it exists. And if it doesn't, I download it, I write it to disk, and I use it for later. And in a production system, you probably don't want to infinitely write images to disk on a finite storage system. But for me, it's usually okay. And I kind of just blow the cache every few days anyway and delete those images. It's good enough. The ledger also was an interesting thing to work through. So in some financial systems, they'll try to keep a more or less running tally of a balance or an available balance and try to increment and do calculations and smartness off of that. But I don't trust myself to not mess up the code, and I don't want to really get in those fights again. So I opted with this really cumbersome approach where anytime I need a balance, I literally just take all of the transactions, I sum them together. Their transactions are typed to being a debit or a credit, and then I sum them up and get a value out of it. And you might say, oh, that's incredibly inefficient. That's correct. However, I don't imagine my kids are going to have the hundreds of thousands of transactions that banks deal with. We're talking like 10 in a month, maybe. Maybe there's 100, but it all happens 3 months close to Christmas, so yeah. So it's good enough for me. I didn't even want to deal with floating point computer funness, so it's super simple, not the most accurate, but it works. So now, we've gone through this whole experience. You might be saying, does it work? That's a great question. Maybe. I will say this, it's been running. My kids love it. They request 1 million things all the time, and I now feel like I don't have to accept all 1 million things, but it creates good talking points at least, where we can talk about why you may not need that thing, or yes, that might be a good thing. In fact, I had one of them request socks. And I was like, sure, I'll let you buy your own socks if you want, I guess. Or I ended up being the good parent and buying it for them. But I thought that was very responsible. And they do have more of a concept of money. They do at least believe me when I say you've already bought things and you don't have that value, because now we have measurable data. And that might be worth it. They also lose their cards. So I don't know how to solve that, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. We might put a camera on this and just do facial recognition. But it works more or less. Of all the projects that I've done, I would say this has been the most successful and not an absolute waste of time. And I also just want to put out that even though projects get useless, or not useless, they get absurd in certain ways, that my plug is hardware is fun, even if it doesn't work out. And it's just fun, and I encourage everybody to try a bit of it. And hardware is generally scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it all starts out typically with useless ideas like this, like my kids yelling at me. And so I figure out a way that I can incorporate that into hardware. And you'd be surprised the justifications you can get to make some sort of fun project out of nothing. But most importantly, I would just say that the biggest takeaway from this is just to always be learning. Projects are ridiculous, sure, but no idea is too ridiculous if you're invested and you're learning, and that's going to be the best outcome you're going to get out of it. That's all I got. Here's some of the repos if you want to look through them. Oh, here's my some social media. This is where I'm usually present. You can find me. I don't think I have anything else. Oh. Come to the Nerves meetup.